Dear viewers, we all enjoy cakes, biscuits, fries, and chips because they taste great. However, you should know that these foods can contain hidden harmful fats known as trans fat. So, welcome to this video on trans fats. In this lecture, I will focus on the definition, structure, sources, health effects, and safe intake limits of trans fats. Let us begin with the first question. What are trans fats? Trans fats are unsaturated fatty acids with at least one carbon-carbon double bond in trans configuration, means hydrogen atoms lie on the opposite side of the double bond, carbon-carbon double bond. This makes the molecule straight and it packs tightly in the membrane phospholipid, making the membrane less fluid and more rigid. This is an example of natural trans fat known as 11-trans-vaccinic acid. However, most naturally occurring unsaturated fatty acids have carbon-carbon double bond in cis configuration, means the hydrogen atoms lie on the same side of the double bond. This makes the molecule kink or bend. As a result of it, it does not pack tightly in the membrane, so membrane is more fluid and less rigid. Let us explore the sources of trans fats. There are two sources. The first one is a natural source, which is a minor source. Second is the most prominent or significant source of trans fat, known as industrial source. Let us discuss first the natural source of trans fat. You should know that animals, humans, and plants do not produce trans fat. However, bacteria in the rumen, which is part of stomach of the cows, sheep, and goats, these animals are also called as ruminants. So bacteria in the rumen of ruminants produce trans fat, which appear in a small amount in meat, milk, and dairy fats such as cream, butter, and cheese. Let us discuss the industrial source of trans fat. The main industrial source of trans fat is partially hydrogenated oil, which is produced by passing hydrogen gas through vegetable oils in presence of nickel catalyst at a high temperature. During this partial hydrogenation, some of the fatty acid is saturated in the form of stearic acid, and the part of this, about 25 to 50% of the unsaturated fatty acid, is isomerized in the form of trans ileadic acid, and the remainder is cis oleic acid. So in partially hydrogenated oil, you have a mixture of stearic acid, trans-ileadic acid or trans-fatty acid, and cis-oleic acid. This is the main or prominent source of trans fats in our food because this is widely used in food industry. Let us examine the contribution of trans fat from these two sources to our diet. The first source includes naturally occurring trans fats, which are commonly found in dairy product and meat, contributing in a small amount to approximately 20% of total trans fat intake. The second source is industrial source that includes artificially produced trans fats, mainly derived from partially hydrogenated oils, which are commonly found in processed food and account for about 80% of total trans fat consumption. The next question is, why do we partially hydrogenate vegetable oils? This business of partial hydrogenation was developed early in the 20th century for the following reasons. The first one being cheaper alternative to animal fats and butter. Second, it is stable during frying, can be used multiple times, therefore it is economical and profitable. The third, it has longer shelf life because of reduction of double bond, therefore less oxidation and less rancidity. Trans fats are not good for heart health. They increase the risk of coronary heart disease, and they do so by altering the lipid metabolism and lipid profile, which is associated with a decrease in the good cholesterol or HDL and increase in bad cholesterol or LDL or lipoprotein, low density lipoprotein. They also impair endothelial function by impairing the release of nitric oxide, thereby making the vasculature more rigid, less flexible. They also promote systemic inflammation, thereby accelerating the plaque formation or atherosclerosis in the blood vasculature. All these together lead to increase the risk of coronary artery disease or heart disease. Trans fat consumption is associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes. For example, a 2% increased energy intake from trans fat increases the relative risk of type 2 diabetes. In contrast, a 5% increased energy intake from PUFA decreases the risk of type 2 diabetes, whereas a 5% increased in energy intake from MUFA has no effect. Therefore, while PUFA is protective, trans fats tend to increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. So far, we have discussed adverse effect of trans fat, particularly those derived from industrial sources such as partially hydrogenated oil. The question is there any good trans fat? Trans-palmitoleic acid, which is present naturally in dairy fat in a small amount, typically ranging between 0.1 to 0.5% of total fat, has been shown that its increased level is associated with improving insulin sensitivity and a lower risk of diabetes. However, the data is observational and limited, therefore, further confirmation is important. Let us explore the recommended intake of trans fat. WHO or World Health Organization made the following recommendations. First, eliminate industrial trans fats completely, especially partially hydrogenated oils. Limit daily intake of trans fat to less than 1% of total energy, which equals approximately 20 calories per day, based on the daily requirement of 2000 calories. And finally, limit daily consumption of trans fat to less than 2 grams per day. Finally, to keep your heart healthy, observe the following practices. First, check nutrition labels regularly and always and avoid using partially hydrogenated oils. Limit processed and fried foods. Keep trans fat intake to less than 1% of total energy intake. Switch to unsaturated fats, healthy fats such as olive oil. Here is a query. What is the source of trans fat in dairy products and meat? The answer is ruminant bacteria. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please like it, share it and subscribe it. Until next time, you take care. Bye bye.